Welcome to homework.
In this problem, we're going to be graphing the Lorentz curve given two sets of data, one for 1979 and another for 1991. To begin, let's just keep track of the data that we're given. So for each quintile, we're given the percentage of income that that quintile holds. So for instance, the top quintile holds 39% of the income that is there in the economy, while the bottom quintile, or the first quintile, they only have 7%. Now we're going to be using this data to draw the Lorentz curve, and if you remember, the Lorentz curve has the following axes. On the y-axis, we have the income quantiles, and for us, the most important ones, so we have the 20th percentile, 40th percentile, 60th percentile, 80th percentile, and the 100th percentile. This corresponds to the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth quintiles. Now on the y-axis, we have the cumulative share of income. The data we're given, as we just talked about, is just the share of income. We need the cumulative share of income, and we need it starting from the 0th percentile all the way to 100th. And so let's first focus on the 1979 data and see how we would go about doing this. So if we want the cumulative share, we're going to be starting off at 0%, going all the way to 20th percentile. So starting here, going all the way to here. In moving up to the 20th percentile, that is the first quantile, we see an increase of 7% in the share of income. So our first point that we're going to plot is at 20th percentile, or the first quantile. That's going to be 7% of the cumulative share. So that's something like that. And then let's take a look at what happens in the second quintile. The second quintile has 11.5% of the income. And because we're curious about the cumulative share, we're going to add this 11.5 with the 7. So we're going to be adding these two together, and we're going to get, as a result, 18.5. And so the second quintile has a cumulative share of 18.5. So the 40th percentile has 18.5% of the income. So that'll look something like this. Now let's take a look at the third quantile. They contribute 17 more percent. And so we're going to add that 17% to the 18.5. And so when we do that, we are going to get a number of, let's see, 18 plus 17 is 35. So we're going to have 35.5. So the 60th percentile has 35.5% of the total income. So let's say that's something like that. Now the fourth quantile contributes 24.8% of the income. And so going from here to here, we have 60.3. So 60.3% of the total income belongs to the bottom 80th percentile of people. So 80 percentile, we go up to 60.3. That will be something like this. And lastly, we have to figure out how much does the top quantile contribute. Well, they contribute 39.7%. So going from 60.3, we're going to add 39.7, and you might imagine that this would be 100%. And this makes sense because if we're taking a look at the 100th percentile, that is everybody in the economy, well, everybody in the economy needs to own 100% of what is in the economy. And so our last point is this point right here, 100th percentile in the x-axis with a 100% share of cumulative income in the y-axis. Now, actually, one other point that I should make is at the start of this, when we don't have anybody in our percentile, so at 0 percentile, we should have 0% of the money being owned by 0%. And so that's why this bottom left and this top right, this point right here and this point right here, they will be a facet of every Lorentz curve. Now that we've come up with these points, we can connect them as best as we can. So it might look something roughly like this. This is going to be the Lorentz curve that uses the 1979 data. And as you can see, this is not close to the 45-degree line in that this red line is not, this red curve is not this diagonal 45-degree line. And so that means that there's inequality in this country, in the United Kingdom. So now let's compare that inequality with what happens in 1991. And so if we're going to essentially repeat the same process to come up with the same curves. So I'll go a little bit more quickly this time. So again, we start at 0% of the people own 0% of the income. 100% of the people own 100% of the income. So those, the bottom left and the top right, those are facets of a Lorenz curve that will always remain the same. And then applying these data points, we see that the first quintile has 6.6% of the income, 40th percentile has 18.1, something like that. And then adding 16.3 to that, we're going to get 34.4. So that'll be 34.4, maybe something like that. Not drawn to scale, of course. Then we're going to add 22.4. That'll be 57.1. So that's going to be right above this halfway mark. And then finally, what we should get when we add 42.9 to 57.1, we should get 100. And in fact, that is what we get. And so now finishing off the Lorenz curve, we just connect these points as best as we can. And what we see is that the Lorenz curve associated with 1991 is farther away from the 45-degree line than the Lorenz curve for 1979. And so what that means is that 1991 has more inequality in income than 1979. Now, some patterns that you could see in the actual quintiles is that if you notice, all of the cumulative share of income in 1991 is less than the cumulative share at any given income quintile in 1979. So just to illustrate that, notice how the green line is always below the red line. So if we were to take a look at, say, 40%, this green dot is below this red dot. If we were to take a look at, say, 80%, this green dot is below this red dot. And so yeah, that concludes the problem. Again, just to recap really quickly, the Lorenz curve has as its facets the following points, 0, 0, and 100, 100. The axes are the income quantiles and the cumulative share of income. So when you're given data, make sure that if you're given share of income data, you add up starting from the bottom all the way to the top. So the bottom quantile to the top quantile, you add up the share of income to get the cumulative share of income.